What's up everyone, Clayton here, and today we're back with another Skyrim build. Today's build is called the Minotaur and was suggested by Lightning Guardian 331. This build is an orc vampire, so if you're looking forward to a vampire build, you can check this one out. There's some backstory for this build, so let's go ahead and get started with that. The Minotaur is a mad immortal who is addicted for challenging battles. He is always looking for a new challenger, and nothing can scare him, including Alduin. So he will look for the most powerful foes in the land to take down. He eats his challengers as a ritual for his victory, but he has no quarrel with people who cannot put much of a fight. He follows a strict rule in killing only when it's appetite or for the challenge overwhelms him. Even with his immortality, he prefers strength and courage and usually charges in the battle like a raging bull. So this build is kind of just like a juggernaut build that uses vampire as well as a namira's ring to feast on their enemies, and also the vampire part of this build kind of just gives him more power and gives him that immortal, and that's why he can't die, is because of his vampire powers, and it does increase some of his skills overall, like restoration, which we'll get to in a little bit. So the skills for this build, like I said earlier, one is restoration, then we have smithing, heavy armor, block, and one-handed. So for restoration, he is an orc, so he doesn't have as much magical skills as maybe the other races does, but he still has a trust and preference to restoration to keep him alive during battle. One perk in particular is pretty good, which is Necromage, which allows all spells are more effective against the undead. This includes his restoration spells that he uses for himself. So in battle, he can use his restoration spell, and it'll do more healing, as well as respite, which allows his stamina to regen as well when he heals, which is pretty good for a vampire since he's not really allowed to regen stamina, magicka, or health during the day. Smithing, because he needs to make sure his armor is in tip-top condition, and since you'll be using heavy armor, you might want to go down the right side of the heavy armor tree, or the smithing tree. Heavy armor is another skill you'll be using. You just want to make sure you get the conditioning perk, allows your armor to weigh nothing and you can run around. Block and one-handed are your other skills that you'll be using mainly. Block's really good for your shield that you'll be using, as well as one-handed, you want to get the most damage out of it. You'll be using war axes, so I recommend getting the hack and slash perks to make sure that your war axes cause more damage by bleeding. So before we get into the gameplay, I'm going to talk about some of the weapons and armor that you'll be using. So for weapons, you can kind of have your choice of shield and some sort of war axe. I use the ancient Nordic war axe because that's the heavy armor set I use, is the ancient Nord. I think it's kind of cool looking on him, as well as it kind of gives that aesthetic that he's old since he's using ancient armor, so he's probably been around for a very long time. For the shield, there is no ancient Nord heavy shield from my knowledge, so I use just a regular steel shield. You could use a blade shield, it doesn't look too bad with them as well. And you can also enchant any of the stuff as you see fit. I do not have enchanting as one of the main skills because I feel like enchanting is just a side skill that you would use if you want enchanting, and it's not a mandatory skill to actually play the build. For the spells that you'll be using, you want to make sure you get a restoration spell to keep yourself alive, and that's pretty much it. There's not really any other spells you'll use. You can use Equilibrium, which is pretty good, which turns your health into magicka if you need that during the day. This allows you to get more healing off because you can change the health you have left into magicka and heal yourself since you have no regen during the day. So for the gameplay, you kind of play as the name entitles. You are a Minotaur, so you want to run around like a raging bull. You want to be able to use your block ability to charge at people and knock them down to the ground and slash them up and down with your war axe. As well as you have the berserker rage in your back pocket if you need it to use to fight multiple enemies, or if you're fighting a tough opponent like some sort of legendary dragon. There are shouts that you can use as well, which you can use to kind of brute force your way in. Unrelenting Force is pretty good, it just knocks away everyone around you. And Disarm is pretty good against enemies who are a little bit too hard to handle, and you want to make sure you get that weapon out of their hand. So pretty much this gameplay is pretty straightforward. You want to run in, do as much damage as you can, and if you really want, you can pick up the Vampire Lord, which allows you to have a different form, which is pretty powerful. But I would recommend not using the form where you can use your spells, because that doesn't really fit in the build. I didn't actually use Vampire Lord because I didn't really feel like it fit too much into the build. I felt like the Vampire Strength was what gave him his brute force. But if you want to, you can go in the melee form of Vampire Lord and slice people up. I think that would be the best way to play it if you're playing with a vampire lord. Also, for a standing stone that you could use, the Atronach stone, it would be pretty okay. It lowers your regen of magicka, but it also gives you a resistance and you can absorb magic. So it's pretty good and allows you to get magicka back and maybe absorb some of it so it's less effective to you. So yeah, pretty much this is a straightforward raging bull. You want to strike with strength and courage, and you want to knock people on their asses. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to leave a comment down below. I don't know what I said there. And yeah, check out these two videos here. And this is Clayton, signing out.